Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Saphire, an attorney in Massachusetts.
And I'm Camille Barron, a financial coordinator, also in Massachusetts. And Roberta, today, this again is one of our encore performances, which we've had many of because so many of our viewers send emails and ask to know more about a particular topic. So we're going to hear about some interesting cases on the law.
Yes, we're very lucky to have David Yaz back with us. And
My friends.
And a lot of our emails that say not only were you interesting, but you were one of our most handsome guests.
Well, that was, I think, the same month you had some Labrador Retrievers on the show, and so, but thank you, it's very kind.
No, and you're also very interesting, and you were, for 6 years, you were the editor of Lawyers Weekly. You're an attorney.
At Lawyers Weekly for 15 years altogether, as a matter of fact.
15 years.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
okay.
you tell us about you and what you're doing now.
Sure, yeah. I'm a lawyer by education, but 15 years at Lawyers Weekly, running the weekly legal newspaper, following all the interesting cases in Massachusetts and Boston and elsewhere. And then I made a shift. So print media isn't quite what it used to be, so I was sort of poked around for something else. I made a complete shift. I'm a financial advisor now, so I work at a firm called Bernstein in downtown Boston, and helping people plan their investments with a specialty in crossroads. So if you're someone who's been divorced, someone who's just settled a lawsuit, and also people whose child has been diagnosed with special needs, that's important to me. I work with a lot of families who are facing those challenges, and so I help them plan
we
their
brought
future.
that up the last time,
Yeah.
too. How is that coming?
It's coming well. For the planning need, unfortunately, there's a big need for it. I'm involved in a lot of causes around autism. My son's on the autism spectrum, and Adrian's doing terrific, and he's right here in the Sharon High School as a freshman and doing very well, but he's always going to need some help. And so the latest numbers are 1 in 44 kids have autism, so that's pretty stunning. That's pretty stunning. So there are a lot of people who need help because there's really no singular roadmap to navigate the way your family's going to proceed and plan when you have a child with special needs.
Yeah, well, thank God that the schools and the communities and the world are acknowledging special needs.
It's not bad. It's better than it used to be, particularly autism. And there's been a lot of, given these rising numbers, there's been a lot of awareness around autism, which I always think is a good thing. The schools, it's always a battle, quite frankly. So our town, Sharon, has been, frankly, hot and cold for years, and they employed the services of the New England Center for Children, which is a wonderful school for kids with autism in Southborough, and then decided that they weren't going to work at that school anymore. We're going to put a program together themselves. That was not a very popular decision among special needs parents. So it's always a bit of a struggle. There are funding questions, but we still do have a pretty good program here in town.
Well, certainly your law background doesn't hurt.
When it comes time to fight that, I hire lawyers whose specialty is special needs advocacy.
We had a lawyer on, a special needs advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I think I sent you her name.
We
Marie
did.
Mercier.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, she does that, and she's pretty busy.
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty busy topic.
Yeah.
But what we want to still find out, which we didn't finish, was some of your most memorable cases that will.
It was a cliffhanger. We got to a few of them, but we didn't reveal what the final couple cases were. Right, most memorable cases.
That's right.
But what would
There
you?
was one of the gay marriage decision.
There was a gay marriage.
And that is still hot.
Let's go back, just kind of recap where we left off, or what we covered.
Sure. So you would ask me what the 5 most interesting cases I covered over the years were, and I mentioned a case called McNeil, which I couldn't possibly summarize, but suffice it to say it was a murderer who had slipped through the system and eventually died in a gunfight. The Demoulas case, which I think we spent some time on, which was the battle over the Demoulas and Market Basket supermarket fortune, and there were all kinds of twists and turns to that case. There was the Judge Murphy case, where the first judge in Massachusetts to successfully sue for libel and sued the Boston Herald and won millions in that case. And then the remaining 2 were the Louise Woodward case. People will remember the
nanny,
the British nanny, and the gay marriage case, Goodridge, which this year we're actually celebrating the 10th year of gay marriage in Massachusetts, if you can believe it.
Really? It's already
That's right.
10 years. How many? Do you know how many states allow gay marriage?
Oh
now?
man,
I-
it's more than 10 now, so I'll probably get it
Oh.
wrong, and it's constantly changing. There are a couple of states taking it up really as we speak, but that number is going to continue to grow. And of course, the Supreme Court decision was favorable towards gay marriage, that case this year, and so it's the momentum is absolutely there. The public opinion has absolutely shifted over the past 10 years since Massachusetts took the first step.
I'm just curious, as a financial planner, have you had the opportunity to arrange financial planners for gay people with a gay marriage?
Sure.
Really?
And there are certain nuances to it that can be different than a typical couple, but those are going to fade away, certainly in Massachusetts, because since same-sex couples can get married, they're afforded all the same rights. There's still some federal rights that are waiting to get caught up, so things like federal tax returns, are still a nuance, a difference, and a
They
different kind
can't.
of planning.
It's not recognized federally.
Right. It will be in time, but at the moment, no.
So that's interesting.
Well, can you refresh
Yeah.
our memory about this 10-year-old
Sure.
case?
Yes.
Right. Well,
yes,
it was at the time, gay marriage was still non-existent, and we had civil unions in Vermont, and so at Lawyers Weekly we were waiting patiently for this decision to come out. And when it came out, I was actually they had me on the air on Channel 5. I remember Susan Warnick was the anchor, and she had me on the phone and told me, well, interpret the case. And I said, I don't even have it in front of me yet. And suddenly it came down, and it's like 300 pages. And so we're flipping through, and it sounded a lot like the Vermont Civil Union, that we're going to grant all the rights to couples. But it turns out that what the court meant was absolutely full-blown gay marriage, and it was a 4-3 decision. So I knew personally all the judges on the case that had made the decision, and it was interesting because there were 4 of the judges that were on the bench. 4 of them were appointed by Governor Paul Cellucci. You remember Cellucci, right? So
yeah. Was he a Democrat or Republican?
he was a Republican,
Okay,
right? So
Republican.
we had Weld, we had Swift, we had Cellucci, a slew of Republicans in there. But Cellucci was probably the most conservative of the group, and so there were speculation that he would want to appoint conservative judges with an eye towards maybe defeating gay marriage.
Oh.
So 3 of the Cellucci appointees voted against it, but 1 Cellucci appointee voted for it, and she's considered the swing vote. And her name's Judy Cowan, and she's this I don't mean to sound, she's sort of a mousy little woman, but that sounds negative. She's also brilliant, and she's a hero of mine for doing what she did. She kind of rode against the grain. And who knows why she had that feeling that gay marriage was the right thing to do. Now, on the other side were more classic liberals, Margaret Marshall, whose family emigrated from South Africa, Roderick Ireland, who was the first African-American judge on the bench, and John Graney, who is just a wonderful liberal-hearted soul who wrote this really impassioned sort of concurrence, sort of a side opinion in the case, talking about how these people who happen to be homosexual are the people we see at our banks, in our churches and temples, and we need to treat them the same. But Judy Cowan was the mystery. And so I'll tell you one brief little factoid. I saw her last year at a dinner, and she has since retired, and I said, Judge, I never told you this, but I just want you to know that you're a hero of mine. And she's standing with her husband, who's also a former judge, this guy, Bill Cowan. They're standing together, and she said, Judge, you took a lot of courage 10 years ago to stand up for gay marriage, and you really changed the course of history. It's amazing what you did. And her husband looks at me and looks down at her, and he says, and she can't even keep the kitchen clean. Can you believe it? So, anyway, it was. But at the time, certain people around who were close to the gay marriage fight, including Mary Bonato, who's this diminutive little woman who was really the hero of same-sex marriage with gay and lesbian advocates and defenders. She made the argument in favor of it. She was worried that this was happening too soon, and that if the rabble-rousing caused by gay marriage went up to the Supreme Court, they might strike it down, and then that would sort of set the movement back 20 years. But as it happened, it has marched along, and you can look back to that one decision, 4-3, close call
it
in
is
Massachusetts.
close.
Yeah.
Really?
4-3.
Imagine that.
Now-
There are a lot of decisions that are passed 4-3,
Yeah,
even
sure.
at the Supreme Court level.
Could they have brought that up further to the Supreme Court of the United States? Mass decision?
That was a decision on state rights. So
Oh.
all it did was speak to whether you could get married in Massachusetts.
Oh.
And you would need something unusual for it to go up to the Supreme Court. Now, there were challenges, and there was a challenge to try to put it on the ballot, if you remember that. They all failed. And so eventually Governor Romney said, this is terrible. We're going to become the Las Vegas of gay marriage. People are going to swoop in and get married in Massachusetts.
Well, they started to.
A little bit, but, I mean, you have to take up residence in Massachusetts. It's kind of
Yeah.
a hassle. It never really happened. A lot of people marched up to City Hall that day when the law went into place, and that was a nice moment for a lot of people who had been waiting years and years to get married, but
Interesting.
it never resulted in chaos.
Do you think they really wanted to get married, or they just wanted to make sure that they could live like other people, inherit from each other, and
If they want the grief
right.
and torture of marriage like the rest of us, sure, right? The original couple who got married, who were the named plaintiffs, Hillary Goodridge and her partner, they got married and they later got divorced.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are some
within
now
a
that
getting
year or
divorced.
something.
Right.
And then you have to divide property
That's right.
and custody of children.
I found it humorous if there were some same-sex couples that were sitting around and hearing the news, and one would say to the other, "Can you believe it? Isn't that great? We can get married now." And the other one looks at it and says, I kind of liked it that way.
Let's go on to this one. Really caused a stir. This Louise Woodward.
Sure.
I mean, that was amazing. This is the British nanny with a shaken baby case.
Yeah.
And I think there's been others now. That really churned up a way for different laws.
That to me was sort of the dawn of the mega case as covered by the media as such. I mean, it was hysterical, and it was right here in Massachusetts. The judge was Hilaire Zobel, who was regarded as a brilliant guy who was kind of a jerk on the bench, to tell you the truth. And maybe he even wore that with a badge of honor, but he was a cranky guy on the bench. And yet, when the trial started, he had this habit of bringing fresh flowers and putting them on his bench before the proceedings started. And so the media thought he was colorful, and isn't he interesting? And the lawyers in Massachusetts are kind of saying, we don't necessarily think he's the most friendly guy. But no one questioned his intellect. Many questioned the way he handled the case. Now, if you remember, he ultimately, despite the ruling of the jury came back and said guilty. You're guilty of murder. Hilaire Zobel found what, you can't call it a footnote really, it's the law, but a device by which he was able to have sole discretion over the sentencing in the case. And so he sentenced Louise Woodward to time served, meaning the time she had already
she
served.
just got off.
So she
Didn't
walked-
she have to go back to England? Was that part of it? Did they have a tape of her abusing the baby?
No, it was all circumstantial and medical evidence, and so the defense put on all kinds of medical experts. The prosecution did too. Now, the prosecution was handled by Jerry Leone, who went on to become district attorney of Middlesex County, and so I heard a recreation of it. Lawyers Weekly, we had Jerry Leone come and recreate his closing in the Woodward case for an event that we had. We used to have these, we called it Battle of the Lawyers, and we had like several lawyers recreate. So I heard it, and it was gripping. It really painted a picture of Louise Woodward being a nanny who was frustrated, who
was he? He was the DA at the
he
time?
was a prosecutor with the
Oh, he was
DA's
the
office,
prosecutor,
and Martha
yeah.
Coakley was on that team too, if you recall. Tom Riley was the DA at the time, so it was kind of an all-star team.
Who was her defense?
Harvey Silverglade, if you remember, Andy Good, Barry Scheck was in there
I remember
too.
Barry
Remember
Scheck.
him.
He's-
So where are
he's
they
well known.
today? Are they just...
They're still around, I think. I
Okay.
think Silverglade's still, and Good, I think they're still doing their thing. I'm sure Barry Scheck is still practicing law somewhere.
I
And of course-
don't think many people were upset with her getting off.
What was the, can you
I mean,
just
can you
quickly,
imagine if
the
somebody killed your
circumstances?
Oh,
baby?
sure, yeah. Well, it was a sort of well-to-do family, the Eapins, and the child was Matthew Eapin, who was 2 years old, or perhaps a little younger than 2. And Louise Woodward was a British au pair, and and one day they responded to some medical trouble with Matthew and took him to the hospital, and sadly he died. And so when they tried to sort out what had happened, they diagnosed him with shaken baby syndrome. So Louise Woodward got put on the spot. The reason why, it's still a little bit of a mystery as to why this case became such a huge case, because there are plenty of other shaken baby, and a lot of people said if this happened in Roxbury or Dorchester, you wouldn't have heard about it. But it was a well-to-do family who lived, I want to say Wellesley, it was definitely Metro West somewhere. He was a prominent physician. And and then it became sort of an international thing where people were afraid that she wasn't getting a fair shake because she was British in an American court. And if you recall, the reporter, Dan Housley, the television reporter, set up shop at this pub in England called the Rigger Pub. And every time there was a twist or turn in the case, you would go to the Rigger Pub, and the people would be sitting there with their beers all day long just watching the Louise Woodward trial. And they were disappointed when she was found guilty. But it was a crazy case. When I was at Lawyers Weekly, Judge Zobel said, when I release my decision, it'll be posted on Lawyers Weekly's website, just like I always do. All of a sudden, our website crashed because everyone was clicking on our website. Those were before the days where we had reinforcements. People were calling our office. I got calls from BBC reporters. I got calls with questions ranging from interesting to kind of silly. People calling up trying to figure out what Hillary Zobel's middle name was. I didn't know. A reporter called and said, so if Louise Woodward gets found innocent, not guilty, can she just walk out of court? And I said, well, yeah. And they said, well, doesn't she have to go back to jail and get her stuff?
Oh, they got to be kidding.
So she was found guilty.
She was found guilty, correct. I'm sorry, I haven't taken it I'm jumping around a little bit, but she was found guilty by a jury, and she broke down and started crying in the court. And a friend of mine, a guy named Lincoln Jalalian, he was on the prosecution team, and I asked him what it was like in the courtroom at that moment, and he said she was crying and making all kinds of noises, and I decided I was going to get the hell out of there because I thought she was going to throw up. So, moment of comedy in there. But so, she composed herself, and then she goes back to jail. They come back for the sentencing phase. Essentially, I'm leaving out a couple parts, but meanwhile, there are crowds outside of Middlesex County Courthouse. There are people holding Free Louise signs and everything. A strange gathering. And when they came back through this procedural device, Judge Zobel said, well, it's come time for sentencing, and I think it's time to bring this case to a merciful close. And I sentenced the defendant to time served, meaning she's done. She's served her sentence already. She walks out, which is, of course, highly unusual for a murder, someone convicted of murder.
Yeah, murder.
Wow.
And he had the right to do that.
Yeah, it was an unusual procedural anomaly, which I won't even go into it because I don't remember exactly the specifics. But it was, a lot of people were upset that he had in essence nullified the decision of the jury.
Well, the jury must have had grounds to find her guilty because there's the whole thing of beyond a reasonable doubt.
Absolutely.
And do you recall anything about that? I mean,
just a lot of physical evidence, a lot of the way that he had died, the baby had died. Suggested that his brain had been injured in a way consistent with that could only be done by someone shaking him, and presumably out of frustration. And so the case is very persuasive on the prosecution side.
Whatever happened to Judge Hillary Zobel? Is he still
He retired, but he's still around. I've seen him here and there. And Louise Woodward went back to England and enrolled in law school. She was going to become a lawyer. And then I heard that she actually dropped out and was teaching dance classes or something. So I don't know what she's doing now, but it was a crazy case.
What do the people do? I mean, I was thinking, I remember when that happened. Boy, if somebody killed my baby, and and there was no reasonable doubt, I think, I don't know what I would do. I'd probably go after the person, murder them myself.
Yeah, well,
be so enraged.
I'm glad you're on my side. That's yeah. Well, of course. I mean, who's to say? I mean, it's an unspeakable tragedy when a baby like that dies, and so, that's just, in following the case, and of course, what made it very sad was to see this family broken up. I had an unusual moment when my second son was born. And, you know, when you have a baby, there are all kinds of doctors in and out of the room and checking
Yeah.
in. For a moment, they were worried about his breathing or something, and my son was fine. But there was a specialist. They said, we're going to call in a specialist. The specialist comes in, and I'm looking at the doctor like, I feel like I know this guy. I'm looking at him, and it was, he left, and I said to my wife, you know who that was? It was Dr. Eapen. It was Matty Eapen's father, Sunil Eapen, you know, who was just a very, very prominent doctor at the time.
Yeah, he could have snapped too and said, well, I don't have my baby. This way. I mean, you know, get rid of the other babies.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
You never know. Oh,
Yeah.
my
Well,
God.
he
So
treated-
your son's okay, though?
No, my son was fine. It was one
okay.
of those. He breezed in for a
Well, you
while.
know, I mean, we're like going across into you've got to be kidding, but you've got to be kidding. I wanted to bring this up, what you thought. There's, I don't know if the case is done or what happened to it, but someone sent us a clipping about whether or not these twins are going to get away with murder. Of course, you can't say twins because they saw one of these persons, identical twins, and they're saying he committed the murder, and he says, well, that wasn't me, that was the other twin. What happens with something like that? They do get away with murder, huh?
Well, it reminds
don't
me
know.
of an episode of
Got
LA.
to be kidding.
It reminds me of an episode of LA Law where
Here, you got to be kidding.
there was an episode of LA Law where they pulled that. It was actually a husband and wife, and the child had perished. And it might have even been a shaken baby thing. This is fictional, of course, but there's a husband and wife, and so they put the husband on the stand, and all of a sudden he says, you know what, I just realized what must have happened. My wife must have killed the baby. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding. And so, but they were being tried jointly. The two of them were being tried jointly. So
Is
then
that the one where they hold their hands in the elevator?
That's it.
You
Good
know how
memory.
many years ago that was?
So I remember I was in college a long time ago. So you're right.
Oh,
What
me
happened?
too. I was in college. It was a long time ago. No, because the kid was, he had a lot of problems.
That's
and
right. He was blind. He was blind. And so they thought, did they put him out of his misery? That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, because
And
you never know. They
so
said,
on
oh,
the
she
stand,
must
they're being
have
tried
done it.
jointly, but on the stand, the husband blames the wife blames the husband.
Yeah.
The jury says, well, we have
Yeah,
reasonable
sure.
doubt on
Yeah.
both of these, not
Yeah.
guilty. And then someone sees
Yeah,
in the
in
elevator
end,
afterwards,
in the elevator,
they hold
they're
hands.
like holding their hands.
They were in cahoots the whole time.
Oh.
Yeah, well,
really?
you do that.
So with the
But what do you think-
twins-
yeah, what about these twins?
Well, what I'd say is, you know, if
You might give identical twins ideas.
well, it's a defense, but there are other ways to prove somebody guilty than just eyewitness, right? Was there any physical evidence? Was the
well, today, yeah.
you know, was there anything? You know, did they actually apprehend the person and find anything on his body? You know, that very person.
Oh,
Then
yeah,
there's
I
no
don't think
confusion.
so.
Or so in essence, it's it's the same defense as saying it wasn't me. It was someone that looked just like me. It doesn't have to be a twin.
Yeah,
It could
I
be-
wonder if they said to him, "You've got to be kidding." Now, then there was this woman who stole money from a hotel room, and she tried to tell the police, "Wasn't me, it was my twin." And meanwhile, she didn't even have a twin.
It was her evil twin that no one's ever met before.
They said you had to be kidding. And then there was this word. I have no idea what it means. Maybe you do. Epigenics. Epigenics.
That I do not know.
Have you heard of that?
I don't know.
Epigenics.
Epigenetic. No, I haven't heard of that one.
Okay,
But
so.
can you think of anything that?
For you got.
Oh,
to
you've
be
got
real,
sure. I've got
very
one
good?
just in the news today. There's a study by, I wish I knew who, I don't know, but that one of my favorite fast food places, which I thought was healthy, turns out is not so much. And I'm sorry, Panera Bread, but you fooled me. Panera Bread, you let me down. Yeah, apparently, you go and you think you're getting very healthy food.
Yeah.
The whole grain bread is actually not 100% whole grain. The apple chips on the salad are processed. There are nitrates in there. There's MSG in the soup. It's just the Panera Bread got a very low report card, and just when you thought you could have a healthy fast food. So Panera Bread, which of course literally translated means bread.
Bread.
Yes, is you've got to be kidding. You've
What
gotta
about
be
these
kidding.
places that do the gluten-free? That's popular now, gluten-free.
Yeah, I want to know who invented gluten because I had never heard of it until about 5 years ago. Right?
Oh, we
Is it-
heard about it many, many years ago in our business, where somebody would call up and say, "My son needs a special meal. He's a celiac." Celiac.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's gluten-free.
My cousin wrote the book, Elizabeth Hasselbeck. She was on The View, and now she's.
Oh,
from-
really?
Yeah,
Is that your cousin?
she
That's
had.
your cousin,
Yes,
really?
she had
Have your
that disease.
autograph?
What? No, she had that disease,
Sure.
and She wrote this
Oh,
book,
yeah.
how she navigated through it, and it was diagnosed, and what the
Yeah.
diet should be. But I remember when she was a teenager, she would be in bed a lot with stomach cramps, and
right?
nobody knew why.
How did she survive on the island? On the Survivor?
On this, my in-laws there, she switched to gluten-free, and she says her arthritis is gone, and this is gone, and that is gone, and you've got to be kidding.
Yeah.
And one more thing. We go to this place in Arizona. It's called Sweet Tomatoes. I would love to open up a Sweet Tomatoes around here. You go through and you take whatever salad you want. There's got to be 25 different items, and then they have 4 soups or 5 soups made from scratch, and they have like different pizzas and muffins and 3 different pasta dishes and soft serve dairy and fruits. That's the whole thing. You
sounds
do
good.
it yourself. It's fantastic. I mean, if you ever want to watch your food, you see what you're eating. But what's interesting, what they did the last time, they have the calories under each item now.
Right. That helps a little, but you don't know other ingredients in there. But it
Oh, you
sounds
don't
like
know
fresh
if they're telling
vegetables.
you.
Well, it's like orange leaf is now very popular, ice cream plate, and it's
Oh, I hate
low-fat
to
frozen
say
yogurt.
that. I got sick there. I
And
mean,
you-
I don't want to say anything. I can't eat yogurt anymore.
No,
I
but
think it was
you know,
just me.
it's healthy dessert, right? So it's low-fat yogurt. You get low-fat yogurt, and then
It's
you put,
loaded with
you
calories.
put Oreos and gummy
Yeah.
bears and gummy worms and M&Ms, and
Oh,
it's
you
still
loaded
healthy.
it. Oh, yeah, you load it up to there and
Sure.
have 5 pounds there. Those are popular in Arizona
Sure,
too.
yeah.
But I mean, think of a Sweet Tomatoes here. Wouldn't that be great?
That would be good. We could use
Well,
one.
that's a good way to end the show.
It sure is. That's a sweet way to
It's a
end.
sweet ending.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'll come
coming.
back anytime.
Yeah.
There's always something interesting out there, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Each one
we're
becomes a
gonna
little
get
bit.
we're going to get all kinds. The last time you were on, I had, I do a lot on the probate court. I had different lawyers that I never even knew came over to me. I saw that show. I remember that case.
Pretty good.
They all said, I remember that case.
So there, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
And to our
David.
viewers, we hope that you enjoyed this. These are very interesting
my
cases,
stuff.
high-profile cases.
Yes.
And if you have any other thoughts about this show or any other topics that you would like us to cover, that's where we get our ideas from. So please let us hear from you. Because remember, this is your show. The law, your money, and you.